what was the relationship like with your dad? This podcast, Military Veteran Dad, is brought to you by the Business of Fatherhood, an effort by me to help you become a better dad. By helping dads create a lasting feeling of change on the inside, help them grow through generational trauma, and by redefining the definition of living. There is more to life than being alive. To find out more information about this, head on over to benkaloy.com or check out the Business of Fatherhood podcast on any and all platforms.
Dory 1, this is Fire Team Delta. Dad's coming home. Welcome to the Military Veteran Dad Podcast, where it is our mission to bring every dad home. I am your host, Ben Kaloy. I'm a United States Marine veteran, husband, and a father. We will bring authentic conversations to inspire action in your life so we can close the gap between the dad you are today and the dad you want to be tomorrow. This is the Military Veteran Dad Podcast. Today on the show, I have a very good guest, Richard Kaufman. Richard Kaufman first enlisted in the Army in 1986 and signed up to be a tanker, but shortly reclassified himself to be a cavalry scout. And Richard has an incredible story. He just recently published an ebook on Amazon where he told those stories all the way back from when we first joined to now. And there's some really heart-wrenching stories. So instead of me talking about his introduction, I'm going to let him dive right into it. Richard, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me, and I'm really appreciative and grateful that you had me on today. I don't know how I'm going to follow up an interview with Stephen Kuhn, but I'm going to try.
Oh, no pressure.
No pressure.
Richard, go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself and what makes your story so fascinating.
Well, in my opinion, it's not fascinating.
It's not fascinating.
It's just my life. You know, there's three parts to my story actually. I grew up very poor, single mom. Dad hauled ass at like 3. I'm just going to give you the quick down and dirty. I went to like 10 or 11 different schools by the age of 12. Was a full-blown alcoholic by the age of 13. Quit school at 16. Became an emancipated minor, which means that I was an adult at 16. And I joined the military. And I shipped out like a week after my 17th birthday. Joined the military. Army, was in there for 2 years. I liked the Army. They didn't like me. I became a full-blown alcoholic and drug addict in the military. And they booted me out after 2 years for, I forget what it was. It was just for non-conforming. And then I got out. I moved back home, but, you know, after being away for 2 years, partying, hanging out, you know, staying up for weeks at a time, you know, my mom and dad tell me I got to go to bed at like 11 o'clock, you know, it wasn't happening. Mm-hmm. So they booted my ass out. And that's become a thing in my life, getting booted out of a lot of places. So I lived in a crack house for a while, and I had a job and everything, but my habit was so bad. I don't know if you've ever talked to a drug addict, but for somebody that gets kicked out of a crack house, that's pretty bad. You know? Yeah,
almost a good pun to a joke. Like, I feel like that's a crack addict
exactly.
joke.
You got to be at the bottom of the barrel to get kicked out of a crack house.
Yeah.
So I lived in my car for probably about maybe a year, somewhere around there. I told my mom I'm going back to school, so she allowed me back in the house. At this time, I'm still an alcoholic. So guess what? I go to school to be a bartender. Smart, right? My friend owned a bar in New Jersey, and he hired me on New Year's Eve, 1989. Get to work. Everything is going good. The booze is going good. You know, customers are happy. Next thing you know, I wake up the next day with like $5,000 or $8,000 cash in my pocket, and there's a knocking on the door, and it's the police. I robbed the place, and the gentleman gave me a chance to get the money back because I gave away like $600 to $1,000 worth of free drinks away. Plus, I took the cash. So I'm looking at maybe 5 to 7 years in prison. And he said, if you get the money back to me, and you have to go to AA, 90 meetings in 90 days, and you got to sign everything. And you won't go to jail. So back then I was too pretty to go to jail. So I hit like something stupid, like 350 meetings in a row. And I haven't had a drug or a drink since 1989. But I was still an asshole. So I joined back in the military again. I thought I was going to like it again, and which I really did. I loved it. But I still had that dry drunk attitude that I knew everything and I was still a wise ass. Mm-hmm. So I moved to South Carolina, Pennsylvania, then South Carolina. And I stayed in for a while. I was about to be thrown out again for the second time at the end of September of 2001. And then since we moved originally from New Jersey, I knew people that were in the towers. And on that morning of 9/11, I was getting ready for work. And I found out everything. I'm watching it on TV. And something inside broke me. And I broke down and I crumbled into the couch. And something really broke inside me. And I think that was God working on me. And I knew that at that moment that something changed in my life. And I vowed to God and to myself that if the military allowed me to stay back in, I would dedicate the rest of my career to the people we lost on 9/11. So I had to go the next day or two to beg my company commander to keep me. Thank God they did. And I stayed in and I excelled. I became a Soldier of the Year within 2 years. I became a non-commissioned officer, which I still live by the NCO creed to this day. So I stayed in. Now this is the last part of my story. I stayed in and then I moved back to New Jersey. And I was getting ready to go on my first annual training with the National Guard here. And I was backing up a Humvee. And instead of him hitting the brakes, he hit the gas and ran over the whole right side of my body, ran over my head. And I lost vision in my left eye. And the military told me, if you can't see, you can't shoot. So they put me out within like a year or two. So not only did I lose my career, I lost my vision. And I got into a deep, dark depression. And then I decided, you know what? I've come back from drug addiction, alcoholism, homelessness. I can come back from this. So I started working my way back and coming back from blindness. It took me about a year or two, but now that's where I'm at now, where I'm helping people get through the stuff, help people come back, because everybody loves a comeback story. Mm-hmm. And everybody has that ability to come back. Sometimes they just need that. Well, if he got through it, I can get through it. And that's what I'm focusing on now, is helping people that are dealing with, drug addiction, alcoholism, homelessness, physical problems, divorce, anything that they're going through in their life. I'm there to help them get through that stuff. And that's the 3 parts of my story. A lot of people say it's crazy that I've been through all that, but I just think it's my life. It's mm-hmm. not nothing great. It's just my life.
Well, that is even better than in the book and the article that I was reading about you as well before this interview. It's even touches my heart even more when to hear it in real person or real life. The part that I've heard it said, and essentially it's kind of what you're at now, that a lot of times you can read something, you can hear a speaker, and you can get really motivated, or you can go to an event and feel like, man, I'm on top of the world, I can do this. But then you come back home and it's just the excitement fades away. And there was a shift that happened in my head when I went to one of these events, because I had the same feeling. And I realized that other people can inspire you, and only until you become the hero of your own story can you really move through whatever you're trying to move through. Like There's no amount of anything that someone else can do to get you to go through your own shit. But when you realize whatever you're going through has a purpose, there's a reason that you're going through all this, because now you know what that look is on someone's face. You know when they're lying about being a drug addict, and now you can help people up. Yeah. I told myself something. I was always picked on in high school, and there was something I blogged to myself about, that I was like, people push you down early in life so later you could pull people up. And I
agree. Yeah, I totally agree.
And that's in a lot of your cases. You went through a lot of hell, but now you can pull people up like nobody's business.
Well, and then this whole thing started with the whole book and the podcasting, everything. Another part of my story that a lot of people don't know, that I've been in the health and fitness industry for over 30 years now, and I have clients right now that are in the NFL, Major League Baseball, WWE, and I was getting interviewed by Donnie Boyven on his podcast, The Success Champions, and we started talking about what I'm doing with my life, now, and then I started telling him my backstory, and he's like, "Dude, that's what people need to hear is your backstory." He says, because there's so many people in the health and fitness industry, but how many people are actually trying to help people just make it and not want to commit suicide? Mm-hmm. And so that's when I just started doubling down on, getting on podcasts, hopefully one day being a TEDx speaker, the book, because most people don't realize on average and worldwide, every 10 seconds, a person commits suicide. Worldwide, every 10 seconds. And in the United States, it's 35 first responders a day that commit suicide, including veterans. So if I can get the word out there and save one life, then that's my goal, is to save lives. It's not about money. It's not about, I'm not that guy that's out there to touch your wallet. I'm not there to touch your heart.
That was one of my missions when I first started the Military Veteran Dad, that I looked at the 22 veterans that kill themselves number. And I think often some of the fault that the organizations try to do is they try to save all 22 at once. And everyone is a different type of person. Each individual person could be like you. Another person could be someone completely opposite of you. And each one needs a different conversation. So I focused on the Military Veteran Dad. And that's the particular one that I'm trying to save and bring home. And I think by going deep within that one person, hopefully I'll be able to touch more.
Yeah, like I was talking, because I speak at rehabs also. I went to a rehab last week, and I was talking to somebody, and what I do is at the end of the talk, end of my talk, I actually go up and hug each and every person that's in the room. And they're like, one kid told me, he was 19 years old. He's like, I've never been hugged. He's like, just that one little thing touched my heart and makes me want to stay clean. So if I can touch a person's heart, it's all worth it. It's all about, like, when I go talk to people, even if it's going to be on a TEDx stage or whatever, I just want to be able to touch people's hearts. Because people half the people won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel.
Yeah. And if that hug is sometimes the first time that they've ever felt affection from someone in their life. I went to a dad's conference last spring, and I came out with the nickname of the best hugger.
There you go.
And a funny hugging story to make one. I'm going on a podcast in February, and he asked it's like a dad music podcast, and he wanted my rapper name. I was like, I don't really have a rapper name. I'm a country guy. And I instantly came up with it, and I was like, Big Hugger B.
Or Sir Hugs a Lot.
Sir Hugs a Lot's a good one as well.
Cool. Yeah,
but Big Hugger B, I was like, it just kind of hit me randomly, but I'm always the guy.
When I was younger, I never had affection from anybody in my life. So as I got older now, within the last 10 years, I want to be that affectionate person. I want to hug my kids, and I want to hug my wife. I want to hug my friends. Because I realize if I can get in your personal space, then I can help you. If you don't let me in your personal space, I can't help at all.
Mm-hmm. Or they're not ready to be helped in that case.
Exactly. Yeah.
I've even read like a book that just hugging your daughter. My daughter is 6 years old. Just giving them that affection from dad will prevent them from seeking it from someone else before they're ready.
And that's funny because I have a 6-year-old daughter too. She'll be 7 next month, and I know she gets sick of it because I'm always hugging her and kissing her, and I'm like, I want you to remember that when I am gone, that your daddy loved you and always wanted to hug and kiss you.
Yeah. If you don't give them that as the male influence in their life, they will go out and find it. And it's like there's a 60% decrease in the chance of your daughter having sex by the age of 12 just by hugging them. Yep.
So that's my whole goal is, because like when I met Gary V last year, and I said, Gary, give me a couple nuggets of information, something that'll help me. He said, you know what? He said, your legacy is always going to be more valuable than your currency. Mm-hmm. And my daughter is my legacy.
Yep. I like that with the legacy is planting seeds in a garden that you don't get to see grow.
Yeah. That's why, like, my goal is to save 1 million lives, but I don't know how, when you throw a pebble in a lake and it just has that ripple effect. So I don't know who I'm saving, but hopefully I'm saving some. I've had a couple people call me and say, since I read your book, I checked myself into rehab. So it's doing its purpose. It's helping save lives.
And someone has to go first, and there's a great power from someone going first and saying that it's okay to be you.
Yep. So
in,
what kind
in
of
today's
questions?
world. Okay, we'll dive into the question. So one thing I didn't get out of your book was I didn't get a lot of your family life. So when did your family life start? When did you start being a dad?
That blonde-haired girl that I talked about in the book, that's my beautiful wife. We met when we were high school sweethearts, and I moved away, joined the military, and 30 years later, we got back together again. And we've been married. We've been together almost 10 years now, and we got a beautiful 6-year-old daughter together. And that's when I really started to try to be the best, after, 10 years ago, I tried to be the best husband, the best father, the best friend. That's when my life started changing to when I become a family man.
So the first question I like to ask dads is, when you hear the words "come home," what does that mean to you?
What do you mean?
When you hear the words "come home," when it says "dad to come home," what does that mean to you?
That means, first of all, I always want to make sure that my family is safe and secure. Like, even before I go to bed, I always got to make sure everything's locked and secure. and I just want to let, when I'm home, that I'm present. There's a difference, and I wrote an article on this, and it got published last week. There's a difference between being home and being present.
Oh yeah, big difference.
There's a big difference, because you could be home like the old days. They used to show the father reading the newspaper or watching the TV and telling the kids to go away. That's being there. It's not being present. So I'm not great at it, but I'm trying to, when I'm home, to be present and be focusing on the family instead of on my phone or video games or playing guitar or anything like that.
And I think many veterans and even active duty service members that either went to war or even didn't go to war, that coming home is the hardest step, because sometimes they initially just don't even feel safe to open up around their family or maybe with their loved one. And that causes them just to be reserved in general. And I think they protect themselves from the one person or the people in their life that needs them the most. And it's a big step for dads to take, but one I'm hoping with the podcast to help people overcome it.
And the biggest person that always has my back is my wife. My wife is my life. She's my life. And when I got blinded, we went to Disney on our honeymoon. And it was funny because, like, a couple weeks after I lost my vision, we're going on a honeymoon in Disney, where there's so many people knocking into you. And my wife she always has my blind side. So I know that she's my wingman. She always protects my blind side. And I'm very grateful for that.
I like that. It's a good analogy, and it really works in your case because of your blindness in that eye.
It's literal,
Yeah.
She literally has my blind side.
I'm a big believer that kids spell love Time. What are some simple ways that you connect with your kids that doesn't cost a lot of money, but they remember 2 years later?
Every Sunday, that's why we were in a little bit of a rush today. We have father-daughter bowling, and we do that together. And on the big thing is, she likes to go to movies, and I like to go to the movies. So every once in a while, we'll go to the movies and just have a movie night together. Or she likes to go to Burger King and have a dinner and then go play with the other kids. So that's kind of daddy time,
I went on a date night with my daughter last week, and I was expecting like a Texas Roadhouse maybe that she'd want, and because that's where my wife took my son on a date night. But no, she simply said Subway.
Okay.
And I was I'm down with that.
Yeah. And then we also, every year we do a daddy-daughter dance.
We got one. We just booked one for March, our first one.
At her school. So, I want to be there because and it's hard for me when I was coming up, I never had that father. So it's hard for me to learn how to be a father without having one. So it's kind of like I'm learning on the fly, even though I'm learning, every day. I'm trying to learn on the fly because, I'll be 50 at the end of the month. And I realize I'm not going to be here forever. And I want my daughter to know that, her daddy did the best that he could.
Probably leads us into our next question. What do you want your kids to remember you when they're at a bar, hopefully being responsible and they're 30? What do you want them to tell them about dad to their friends? What's the story?
Okay, here I got a little analogy that I always talk to whenever I'm on a podcast. When people ask me what my legacy is. I had two uncles. They both passed away. One was younger, but he was a Christian man. Everybody loved him. I had an older uncle that passed away. He was a family man, but he was like an average everyday Joe. And when my older uncle passed away, only the family was there. And when my younger uncle passed away, like he was a Christian man and everybody loved him. They had to have like 2 services. People were packed to come in and they were talking. So many people were giving eulogies. And when I'm sitting at my older uncle's funeral, I wondered that day, what kind of funeral am I going to have? Are people going to show up? Am I making a difference in this world? And then I decided, you know what? I want to be able to impact so many people that I have to have 2 and 3 services. I want people to show up just to make sure that I'm dead, So that's what I want my kids to realize, that my daddy affected this world in a positive way. He wasn't just an oxygen thief.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, I want people to come up and be like, you know what? Your dad saved my life, or your dad saved my family. Your dad helped me through this or through that. Your dad opened car doors for me and stuff like that. Because every day I'm always looking to bless somebody somehow.
I like that. And I can relate to that to a lot, because I would say even just 5 years ago, I didn't have a lot of friends in my life. Really never had a lot of more than maybe 3 or 4 friends that I would count as close. And through a couple of family members would pass and a lot of people would come out, and I would just be like, will anybody even show up and say nice things? Like that was, I had that fear in my head probably for 3 years. I remember watching the Jay Leno finale on Tonight Show and crying my eyes out at the time, with all these people coming out and doing such just amazing things to return what he had done for them. And I'm like, I want to be that guy that people just can't help but come out and say enough nice things. And I was really afraid that I was like, is anybody even going to know I'm gone?
Yeah. So now you're making a difference. You're creating legacy.
Yep. It's a completely different perspective than I had even just a few years ago with that idea. And really what I had for me, my issue was I was always so afraid to talk to people. Like every person that I was talking to was like the high school girl that was going to say no. And I couldn't overcome that until I just said, finally, I'm done with it. And so I just started talking to dads at the park where it was a little bit easier. We already could relate on something. And then I kind of got addicted to it. So then now I talk to people on airplanes. I talk to people at the grocery store, the airport. I'm always trying to find out what's going on in someone's life, because I find like even the TSA agents, those are, even when they are getting paid, even when they're not getting paid, they're just as good. But making them feel better about themselves, they're always making them reset. I was going through customs in Chicago, and asked me how I was doing, and I was like, better than good, because that's my typical answer. And he usually jolts people out because they're not expecting it. And then he's like, oh, I'm not that good. And I knew he was taken off beat, and he really probably was questioning what just happened for the next 10 minutes. But I always try to lift up people around me, because everybody's going through something that day. You never know if that's the one. I had a grocery lady say it back, and she's like, you know what? I'm better than good too. Like yep. Some people just need a little extra.
Yep. And that's why I'm here. That's why I become the comeback coach, because I actually help people realize, because like when I usually do my talks or my speeches, I usually, especially if it's a kid or something like that, eventually I wanted give out eye patches and have them wear it through my whole speech, and then take it off at the end of my speech and not let them know that I'm blind. And because it'll give them a different perspective on how, life is not that bad. Whatever you're going through is only a temporary situation. That's why I put on my post yesterday in my Facebook group that suicide is it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. So, and that's why, I believe that anybody can come back from anything if they just have the right person in their life to help them push them through it.
I'm a big believer that part of the crisis is with even men committing suicide is that for 2,000 years, we belonged to a tribe. And somehow in the last 200, we thought we could do it alone. And more gradually and getting more exponentially quicker at trying to be an individual even more without that support network. But we were never meant to do life alone.
Yep, it's true. Like even like in the programs of AA or NA, they
doing
say
it together.
They say that, I get drunk, we stay sober. So it's also, I was talking to somebody yesterday and I was like, I commit suicide, but we stay alive. So it becomes a we thing. And once people feel that they're a part of something again, because like a lot of people when they get out of the military, they lose that. They don't have they're not in touch with their brothers like they used to be able to do. Like when I was we would be able to just sit on the back of a tank at like 3 a.m. and sitting there bullshitting and telling everybody about their life stories and helping each other out. And when you get out, you're kind of like, all right, what do I do now? I'm by myself. I'm alone again. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big problem to let people know that, it's okay. You're never alone.
In the Marine Corps, we used to have a saying that if you can't lift it, that means that you just didn't have enough Marines trying. They didn't do anything for our back or the VA claims after we get out. But if you couldn't lift it, it just means you had more people on it. I remember 15 people trying to lift things together. And I've equated that afterwards that if you weren't always meant to carry everything that happens to you alone, that if you can't carry what you're going through in life, that just means you need more people helping you around you. Yep. That's why you need that tribe, because you can lean on people and tell them what's going on. And just by getting it out of your head, you can feel lighter.
Yep.
There's so much of it is like an echo chamber in our head that if you keep talking to yourself over and over, you'll eventually convince yourself there's only one way to stop the conversation.
Mm-hmm. And I think, even like one of my mentors, Robert Garcia, the warrior strategist, says, that, we all rise together. Mm-hmm. So so I think that's what I try to be. I try to be the sounding board for people that are struggling, and to know that, even if I can't help you, even if I just have an open ear and take the time to listen, it'll be okay. Because then at least you can tell somebody about your hurts and not having to keep it inside all the time. And that's what the book was about. The book was about helping other people, realizing, if I went through it, you can get through it. You can get through anything. Everybody loves a comeback story. If Rocky didn't come back, then nobody would ever watch Rocky 3.
I heard a story of how Rocky got started. He pitched that for 10 years, an insane amount of tries and an insane amount of numbers. And he believed it so much that he just kept going. The story of Rocky actually began long before the movies, and it's the untold story. Yeah. But it's the one that makes it even that much better, and why probably as an actor, Steven Stallone played it even better.
Yep. And everybody has a story. They just have to reach deep inside and decide if they want to let people know and let people in.
I like to think of it as the shadows, that we spend a lot of mental energy keeping things in our shadows. But the moment you bring it into the light, it's just, it's freeing. It's exposed. It's no longer something weighing you down. It's even just living a life of integrity is keeping all your stuff out of the shadows and into the light. Well, I kind of like to think of it like Superman. Superman gets the energy from the sun, and I get energy from the sun. And so much of what you get energy from when you bring it out of the shadows is also just bring it into the light. It's all kind of like the same metaphor almost.
Like when I was talking to somebody early on like the second or third podcast, and they're like, "Have you ever seen the movie 8 Mile?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I want you to watch it again." He said, "I want you to watch the last scene where the guy puts all his dirty laundry out and the other guy has nothing left to talk about him." He's like, that's what you're doing. He's like, you're putting all your stuff out in public. And then if somebody says, you know what, Rich, you were an alcoholic. Yeah, but I'm sober. But I'm clean. I got a beautiful wife. I got 3 beautiful children, a beautiful home. What can you say about me if I already put it out there?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And because then when you don't care what people think about you anymore is when you're actually free.
Yeah. And then you can even start running faster. It's like you're carrying a pack on your back, and all of those secrets, all of those stories are just burdens that slow you down and mentally just wear you out and prevent you from coming home because you're so exhausted mentally from trying to hide from what is just your life story.
Just like that, when I was writing the book, because I actually wrote it out by hand on yellow pads. And it was actually very cathartic because I actually got to see, you know, everything that's happened to me. Like one of my mentors is Ed Milet. And he, you know, we were talking back and forth, and he says, you know, Rich, nothing happens to you. It happens for you. Everything is a teachable moment. So whatever happened to you in your life, from this point on, it's going to be a teachable moment. And that's when I wrote the book, and I was just like, all right, this was the first 50 years. Now for the next 50, you know, like most people are talking about winding down at 50. I'm just ramping up at 50. You know, I'm excited. I'm pumped up about life.
What was your scariest moment as a dad?
The scariest moment? Probably the moment that I found out that we were pregnant. It was funny because I actually ran out to Rite Aid and got like 2 or 3 pregnancy tests just to make sure it was right. And then when I found out, I was driving home, and one of the songs was from Creed. And in the beginning of the song, you can hear the baby's heartbeat. And the verse came out, am I the man that she really needs? And that's when the scariest part was thinking, am I going to be the father and the husband that my family actually needs? And that's when it really just hit me. It's like, dude, you need to step your game up. So that was, and I was crying like a little girl in the car when I was listening to that song. It was a song called With Arms Wide Open.
I know that song.
And just the beginning when I heard the heartbeat, and I'm thinking like, man, you know, am I the man? Just the words, am I the man that she needs me to be? And so that was probably the scariest, but the most life-changing, I think.
Did you struggle accepting that that you deserve something so beautiful to come into your life as a child? Is that something you had to, 'cause like that maybe you didn't think you deserved it because of what you went through at the time or anything like that?
No, not at all. Not at all. I was just euphoric, you know, because like first you're not supposed to tell anybody that you're pregnant.
Yeah.
But I told everybody that we're pregnant. I was so pumped up and excited. So I considered, but I was at that age, I was 43 years old, you know, 42. So I was older, but I actually could appreciate it more than instead of taking it for granted. You know, some people just have kids and pop them out like it's no big deal. Mm-hmm. And I was just feeling so blessed and honored that, you know, we're having a baby, you know, and I'm going to be like we have 3 kids total. So, you know, just being a father, but then like some guys, they get, you know, when the baby's born, oh, I don't want to change the diapers. I was the first one to ever change my daughter's diaper. And I wanted to make sure that I was the first one. And I was in the room when we had the baby, you know, because I wanted the experience. I wanted to enjoy every minute of it because I know, you know, as I get older, I want to be able to appreciate every moment that I have with my family.
You always hear that, especially like my parents or a lot of people in general is like, oh, but they always go by so fast. And I always feel like that's just an excuse for them not admitting that they weren't there. Like they didn't prioritize, they weren't present. Because I think a lot, if you're there to spend time intentionally, Well, it does go by fast. I don't think there's going to be any regret. Like even starting this podcast, I was never going to start the podcast to be strangers to the people I was creating it for. I went slower. I could have launched sooner, but I went at the speed that my family was going to allow, and I was going to be a dad that I was okay with being, and I wasn't going to sacrifice any of my success for my family. And
well, like I think I've missed maybe one doctor's appointment for all my kids in the last 10 years. I've driven my kids to school every morning. I've had breakfast with my kids every morning. So it's kind of like I want them to know that I was there. I was present, like we were talking about before.
Diving back into your story a little bit, what advice would you give other dads that maybe still have the asshole effect, either in their marriage or in their career, or just as in general that they've struggled to let that go?
I think that, I grew up, like I said, without a real father in my life. And I had a couple stepfathers, and, and I wanted to be I told a story in the book about how I got taken for $65,000. And that was from a step parent. And I wanted to be that when my kids think about their stepdad, because I hate the word stepdad. You're either a dad or you're not,
Yeah.
And I just wanted to think that, because of everything that I went through, I wanted to be the opposite of what I went through. Where sometimes if a person has a great parents in their life, they'll do the opposite and become like total assholes, excuse my language. So I wanted to do the total opposite. So if you're a parent right now that are, having those issues, it can change today. You don't have to, you can just, like if me and my sons, if either of us if I have an argument with either of them, I'll apologize to my kids and say, you know what, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it to come out that way. Because I used to be a very belligerent person. And I don't want to be that guy anymore. So I think once you decide what kind of guy you want to be, then you can start working towards it.
And I think every parent struggles with kids will be kids and they'll push every red button you have. And I think every parent, including myself, has had that moment where they start yelling. But I've consciously always, at the end of the day, when I tuck them in, if I did do something that I don't believe was right, I will always apologize that I'm sorry I yelled. Daddy maybe didn't have the best day at work, or whatever excuse I had the moment that it wasn't right and I shouldn't have did that. I think maybe the first step starts with forgiving yourself for what you did, because until you're ready to forgive yourself, you won't be able to move past it almost. Yeah.
Well, that's the hardest thing. Like even when you're in a program, you're doing like step 4 and step 5 to where you write everything down you've ever done to anybody else, ask them for forgiveness, but then you forget to forgive yourself for stuff that you've done, and the hardest person to ever forgive is yourself. Like I'm a Christian. I'm not ashamed to say it. But I often go back and ask God for forgiveness for stuff that I did 10 years ago. And he's already forgiven me already. And why am I keep on bringing it up? Because I haven't forgiven myself yet. And once you forgive yourself and stuff, and you can be like, all right, I ain't going to do it anymore. I'm done, and then you can finally move on when you've forgiven everybody in your life and you've forgiven yourself for stuff you've done. Now you just have to, like Stephen says, you got to try to live a life of honesty, integrity, and transparency. Sometimes it doesn't happen. You're never perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And even like in the program, they talk about, spiritual progression instead of spiritual perfection. And you have to say, hey, babe, that's my beautiful wife. She's reading with my daughter for the guy. She got homework to do. But, it's all about making progression, because we're never going to be perfect. And I think a lot of guys, or even girls, they forget that, we're just people. People are people. And you're going to mess up, and not to get too wrapped around the axle. And if you do make them, like in my book, I wrote that when I got bailed out by my aunt and uncle, or else I would have went to jail. I didn't realize, I found out later that my stepfather put in some money also. I forgot to put that in the book because I didn't know. So I had to go apologize and, make the right wrong. And then it's over. So sometimes you just have to say, you know what, like if me and you were friends, and if I accidentally offended you, I'll call you and say, Ben, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. You know what I mean?
Yeah. When you have such a diverse background of a story, how do you consciously make sure that your kids fail forward? And like, I can imagine there's some fear where you don't want them to even come close to what you had, but at the same time, what you went through has made you who you are today. Do you struggle with that sometimes, like protecting them too much, or maybe even just consciously letting them fail and knowing not have no idea where it's going to lead to?
Well, I'm kind of like, I'm sorry, I had to plug my phone in. It was starting to get low. I want my kids to fail, because that's the only way you're going to learn to win is if you fail. If you live like I tell my kids, if we get a participation trophy, I don't want it. I didn't earn it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I want my kids to fail. I want my kids to try everything. If you don't like it, okay, it's great. If you don't like playing guitar or playing music, at least you tried it. And I think a lot of parents are afraid of their kids failing. But that's how you become a winner, is by failing. A lot of these people, they say, they've lost like 5 or 6 different businesses before they finally hit on the one business that wins. So if you didn't lose the first 6 times, you would have never won on the 7th time.
Mm-hmm. Even if you think of someone like Dave Ramsey, who was a millionaire and fell all the way down to rock bottom again, and now only after that second time did he create the dynasty that is the Ramsey empire. There's a story I heard by Tom Brokaw about the Greatest Generation, that the one thing that made them the Greatest Generation, which was the diversity and the suffering of the Depression, they wished upon their kids not to have to go through that. But in reality, they wished to remove the one thing that made them the Greatest Generation. Mm-hmm. And so much of like, we want our kids to not maybe have the harm or the hurt of what we had, because we know what it felt like. But in reality, all of that shapes who we are and shapes us to where we are today. And so we always have to be conscious of how we control that, because it does have an effect on them.
Yep. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to put the book out there. So even when I'm gone, my daughter, and after she has kids, they can say, look, check out Grandpa's book. Tell him about what he went through and how much he loved me and how much, what he went through in his life just so we can have a good life. And it's the beginning of creating a legacy.
What advice would you give a dad looking to come home to his marriage? I don't know if I even have it over. I have a book that I go through. I read through it between about 3 or 4 times a year. It's called The Love Dare. And it's a great book. It's called The Love Dare. And there was a movie called Fireproof years ago. And what it does, it takes you 40 days through how to divorce-proof your marriage. And I think that if somebody's going through hard times, in their marriage, I try to think of, am I the man that she needs and that she deserves? And if I work on me, then that's the best that I can do. And if I can work on me to be the best husband that I can be and provider and protector, then everything is going to work out in the end. Because a lot of people think when you marry somebody, you're thinking about, well, what can I get? But instead of, I think, I try to anticipate my wife's needs. I want her to think, if something ever happens to me, that, he was the best husband that he could possibly be. So whenever I get lost in any type of marriage conflict, I kind of created a question to get myself out of it, that at the end of the day, I'm the only person that I can control. And the one way that I've always kind of walked through whatever we were going through was I always try to refocus, like, what have I yet to do myself to work on me? Because I can't control her. I can't do anything. I can beat it up until a dead horse, but all I can do at the end of the day is me. Mm-hmm. And my wife has always reminded me that it's just do you.
Yep. And like I said, my wife, she know, and like I wrote in the book, she knew me from when I was the wild child, when I was, 17 years old, walking around in a towel, drinking from a keg of beer and mooning a priest in front of the high school. She knew me from then, and now she knows me now as a grown man. I mean, I'm still acting stupid and childish as could be, but she knew me at my worst points, and now hopefully she's seeing me at my best points. So, it's fun. It's, I try to be the best husband. I try to be the best father. I try to be the best friend that I can be. And, as long as I'm being the best I can be, everything else is going to fall into step.
Richard, to wrap up this interview, what's a parting piece of advice you want to leave the military veteran dads with?
Be humble. Well, 3 things that I always tell everybody. Be humble, be teachable, and find good mentors. Those are the top 3 things that I would find, because they say that you are the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most. So if, in my life is when I started getting away from watching TV and watching in the news and listening to podcasts, that I actually started, those people became part of my life, like Gary Vee, Ed Milet. So if you find people that are winning in life, if you listen to it long enough, your brain doesn't know if it's real or if it's not, if they're real friends or not. So if those are part of your 5 people that in your life, you eventually will become like that. So, just be humble. Like, I try to be as humble as I can be. I try to be teachable, because every day I can learn something new from somebody. That's why I love sitting next to like old men at the VA and just talking to them, because I can always learn from something. And find a good mentor, find somebody in your life that can take you to where you want to be.
And even in those moments, you're given the gift of conversation, which I'm sure they just happily love, and they'll talk about it a week later that there was that guy that I talked to at the VA.
Yeah.
Or I'm sure you're probably famous at the VA now for the people that go there.
The funny thing is, like, everywhere we go, somebody knows me, no matter where we go. Like, we were on the way to see my mom in Myrtle Beach, and there was somebody. We stopped at a restaurant like 700 miles from here, and we're walking through, and somebody goes, "Hey, Rich." My wife, like, there's no way somebody knows you from here. And it was the mayor of a town that I'm friends with. She's like, how does somebody know you 700 miles away? Or people that, like, when we went to Disney, there were people that actually knew me in Disney. She's like, how did everybody know you? I was like, because I take time and I care about people. I was always told that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah. And you touched on, when you were talking about the average of the 5 people, when I first found my self-help growth mindset 4 years ago, Zig Ziglar was the first person that really came into my life. And he pretty much gave me there was a quote that he said, and it was like my mission, even to this day, that you are where you are because of what has gone in your mind. You can change who you are and change where you are by changing what goes in your mind, which then just, to me, I just went on like this, just trying to change exactly what in my mind with books and leadership and anything I could get my hands on. The only problem was I went a little too much information and not enough action with it. I was absorbing too much stuff and not actually moving my life forward with it.
Well, see, I love when Zig Ziglar says that you can have anything you want in this world if you help enough people get what they want.
I remember hearing that so many times, and it wasn't until like maybe 2 or 3 years ago that it actually finally sunk in that of what it actually meant, and like what an example is of just like conversation. Like, listen to what someone's saying, listen to what they need in their life, and see how you can help them. And Stephen Kuhn's always talking about of just figuring out what they need and try to help them.
Yep. And I want to thank you for buying the book. Now I'm going to ask your people that are listening, what I'm asking people to do is to buy 10 ebooks for a total of $9.99, less than it is to go out for lunch. Keep one copy and give 9 out to your closest friends and family, because you never know who's struggling with anything in life. And 35% of the proceeds are going to it's called Joint Task Force 22-0, that helps raise awareness for first responder suicide. So I'm not making any money on the books. I'm losing money, but it's just about helping, trying to save more lives.
And Richard's book, The Hero's Journey from Darkness to Light, I'll include a link of it in the show notes, and you can go ahead and take that challenge. Richard, it's been an amazing conversation. We dove into some areas that we had not done on the Military Veteran Dad podcast, and I hope to dive into it more with future guests, and hopefully you were just the initial crack into what will be a big cavern of deep conversations of pulling back the onion on what it is to be a veteran.
Well, thank you so much for, just for taking time out for letting me hang out with you today.
It was awesome, and pleasure was all mine, Richard. Thank you.
Brother. Have a great week, and God bless you and your family.
Thank you. That's a wrap, and thank you for listening to today's show, and I really hope you enjoyed it. The lifeblood of any new podcast are the reviews. If you haven't reviewed the podcast yet on iTunes, I would really appreciate it, and you will help us get the message out to even more military veteran dads. As John Maxwell says, if there is hope in the future, there is power in the present. Dads, it's time to come home.